Very good. So we can begin. Once again, just to reiterate, the whole objective here is to just go over some of the things that have been shared over the past few weeks while we've been discussing the topic of perfection, and just to give a space for us to maybe get some more clarity. I have, of course, prepared what you have shared with me in a manner where it might allow for this conversation or discussion to unfold more logically. But feel free to put comments or to share within the message or comment section of Instagram any thoughts that may arise as we're progressing in this discussion. So I already mentioned that this is my first Instagram live, and naturally, before you try out anything new, there's always a concern about how perfect things will go. So there's the uncertainty just has this great capacity to stir up, I suppose, the nerves. So there's a hormonal response within the body, chemicals are released which cause a jittery feeling. And it's very hard to imagine perfection when you've got all of this energy running through your body and experiencing it as it translates into thought processes. But as I imagine, you'll forgive any imperfections as we move through this. I was thinking that there's a strong tendency within us as we move through our day-to-day experiences. It's fair enough that we can talk about a new experience such as my being on the live here and how that can be problematic. But there's many things that we experience habitually in a routine manner that we can find ourselves being confronted with the challenge of will this be perfect or will it not? And I was just reflecting over the weekend here in Ireland. The weather has been somewhat pleasant. We're actually experiencing something of a summer, which means that there's blue skies and there's sun and heat. And I was just thinking over the weekend that there's occasions when life is unfolding in its different ways. So to give you an example, on Saturday morning I woke up and it was a very beautiful sunrise and the sky was very bright. But I had to do some work in the morning. I had some bookings to talk one-on-one with individuals. But, you know, if we were to reflect on how we experience the different occasions of our day-to-day lives, there's these events that transpire and which occur, such as for me on the Saturday morning having to meet one-to-one with individuals who had requested some time to talk. And this is something which gives me great pleasure. It gives me a great opportunity to be able to connect with people and to understand where they're coming from. And then I look out the window and I see the blue skies, and I know that people are going off swimming, and that's something which I really like to do, something I really like to just make the most of, especially when the weather's fine. And so there's this conflict, you know. I had this idea of the morning going in a certain way or things unfolding in a certain way, but straight away the life as it's unfolding presents to me the beauty of the sun in the sky and the opportunity to go swimming, and I'm starting to doubt how committed I am to meeting and taking part in these one-on-ones. Now I'm just using this as an example just to point out how we have things in order to a degree. And then just by the very circumstance of the unfolding of life, everything can be shifted around, and all of a sudden our perspective on it can change. When was it? Yesterday I had to go into town. I work in a clinic, a rehabilitation clinic, on Monday, and I went in there, and in the morning the sky was cloudy, so the weekend, the beautiful skies of the weekend had come to an end, but the heat was still there, and there was optimism, a hope that maybe the sun will come back out again. And so I dressed accordingly and I went into town, and then when I had finished my day's work, it had been dry the whole morning, the whole afternoon, and then when I went to finish and I went to leave, the heavens opened and it started lashing down rain. And so there's a polarity in this that is unpredictable, uncertain. There's an expectation from my experience of engaging with life as I'm moving through the day. You know, the morning I went out wearing a t-shirt, expecting that the day might open up into beautiful skies. And then after lunch, there was no rain, but there was no beautiful skies, but there was no rain. And so there was just this continuously having to navigate the natural modifications in the day as I experienced them. And then coming out and have been confronted with rain and heavy downpour, and the fact that I'm going to step out into it and get wet, that shifts everything. And really what I'm trying to drive home here is the fact that we don't know how things are going to go, and we don't know how we're going to respond to them. And we only find out by actually living it. And then afterwards, we can tell ourselves whether we did things the way we wanted to do them or we didn't do things the way we wanted to do them. But when we're in the moment of it, things are just unfolding and things are just happening. So it's only in hindsight, retroactively or retrospectively, that we're able to make judgments on things. In the very moment that things are taking place, we're working off a framework of our own mental conditioning, our own predisposition towards certain preferences, to things being one way or not being one way. There's some more people joining here. I just want to welcome them in here. I'm not sure of everybody's first names, but Santos, Lunar, I have Jew, Harry. Good to have you all here. Thanks for the support and for taking part. And so there's this tendency within us to become caught up in our own preferences. And so one of the questions I asked in the LinkedIn stories in the past few weeks was, what is it that causes an experience to be imperfect? And one of the answers I received was the judgmental mind. Now, this answer is quite simple, you know, the judgmental mind, and we can all relate to it. We cannot say, yeah, the mind is a terrible thing, it's always judging. And so the answer, we can hear the truth in it, but it's it kind of allows us to raise the question, well, it's the mind's fault, but what does that actually mean? Because when we say it's the mind's fault, it sounds like it's something which we are victim to, or it's something which is happening to us. So we kind of have to break down the idea of the judgmental mind. What does that mean? What's our relationship to the mind? And really what our relationship to mind is that the thinking processes which are unfolding are all unfolding in terms of our likes and our dislikes, how we want things to be and how we don't want things to be. When we have a certain sense that things are going to be positive or work in our favor, we will run after them and do everything to ensure that we get that experience. When things look like they're not going to go to our liking, they're going to go in a more negative fashion, we'll do everything to avoid them and run away from them. So there's a polarity here. There's a moving towards and a moving away from. And so as life is unfolding and we go through the day-to-day events and experiences as they occur, that we are doing so with this fluctuation between what we like and what we don't like, and our expectations for things to be more in line with what we like and not so that we don't have to experience so much of what we don't like. But this is a process. This is a continuous movement which is occurring. And so when we talk about the judgmental mind, the judgmental mind is, how do we define that? We can define it in many different ways, and for the purpose of this live, it would probably take up a lot of time to go into it. But we can simplify the function of the mind to serve in helping us to experience things we like and not experience things that we don't like. That is, in a very simplistic form, what the mind is trying to do. And so what can we do? Well, we can, first of all, appreciate that that's what it's doing. And so when we step out, and as I gave the example, I stepped out from work and I saw the rain falling down. Yes, there is a natural dislike for having to step out into the rain and get wet. At the same time, I can recognize that that is a preference which has been built up through previous experiences of getting wet in the rain and different things. And I can recognize that It's something which the mind has been trained to make a judgment on. And then I can recognize that I have the capacity to either identify with it or not identify with it. And through a process of continuous, I suppose, critique of how the mind is making these preferences, of judging either way, we get more skilled at actually neutralizing the potency of these preferences. So we can recognize the preferences, we can recognize how we would like things to be, but we can also accept that that is not something we need to identify with. It's not something we need to get caught up with. There was other people who I heard around me who saw the rain too, and there's a lot of commotion, and there was a lot of giving out, and there was a lot of complaining and different things. It's not to say that that's right or wrong, it's just that how much agitation does that create for the individual? The reality is that it's raining. You have to make a decision based on that reality, and so be it. But the preference of the mind, that's in regard to, well, how can you respond to that situation? What can you do? But not to get so caught up and entangled with it that it just ends up immobilizing you. Another answer to the question, what is it that causes the experience to be imperfect, was anything that distracts me from being fully present in an experience. So the reason an experience is imperfect is because I'm being distracted from anything that distracts me from being fully present within that experience. Now this statement, anything that distracts me from being fully present in an experience, is what causes imperfection. Anything that distracts me. Anything that distracts me. So that anything, straight away there's this sense of there's something happening that we are not in control of, or that we have no way to monitor or regulate. So something is happening which is causing me to get distracted, and so I'm not able to enjoy the experience, and so the experience is imperfect. But when we look at it like that, there's something happening externally which is causing distraction, but the distraction is happening internally, because the distraction is happening at the level of our mental processes, where our focus is, where our attention is. And our attention will be drawn this way or another as soon as we allow it to become identified with whatever it is that's going on. So right now you're watching this live and you're engaging in it, and you may find that your attention's drawn to something else. Now you can say that the experience of this live has become imperfect because your attention has been drawn somewhere else. But you have a capacity to choose where you're going to focus your attention. And perhaps you chose to focus your attention on something else because actually it's more in line with what you prefer to be doing. If you're honest with yourself, maybe sitting here and listening to me talk about perfection and how we're unfit to be perfect isn't it, maybe in your ideal experience of yourself, that's what you want. But maybe in the reality of the situation, if you get a text message on your phone, or if you see something happening out the window, that actually is more appealing because it takes you away from having to experience this. So we can bring it back again to our preferences, and our preferences are occurring on a framework which is sometimes consciously known to us and sometimes it's not, it's unconscious. But through our capacity to monitor how these preferences are driving how we engage with the world, how we interact, then we become more aware of it. And through the awareness, we start to distance ourselves from defining who we are based on what we like and don't like. So as I said, it's okay to have preferences, but when our whole version of who we are, our whole perspective on our identity is being created based on that framework of what we like and don't like, then we're kind of setting ourselves up for just not being able to accept the experience of what's taking place as it's taking place. Now, there was another question which I asked, how does striving for perfection impact on you? And a very simple response I got was, it stresses me out. And we can all relate to this. striving for perfection. That idea of striving for something, we can see it as a struggle, as something which is taking a lot of energy, a lot of energy and a lot of emotion, a lot of investment. And so it stresses us out. So this is an emotional effect, something which is causing us to experience a whole spectrum of emotions, and we can, if we want, refer to these as being negative. But if we break it down, how do we relate to our emotions? So we say striving for perfection impacts on us in a negative way because it stresses us out. But how do we relate to that experience? And it can be, again, the idea of identifying with what's going on. So when we're identifying with the experience of being stressed, that's a very general term, being stressed. But what does it actually mean? Is it disappointment? Is it upset? Is it frustration? Is it fear? Is it uncertainty? Like, what is the stress that we're talking about when we talk about the impact that striving for perfection has on us? So if we think of it in relation to our life, where, I talked about the live here, and I could get into a situation where I anticipate that this live is going to be perfect. It's my first live, but it's going to be the best one. It's going to get off to a great start. And I could hold that as my preference, and I can strive to achieve that. Obviously, I can do my best to ensure that things go well. But as we know, life is life, and many things can happen. The battery could go on my phone, the internet can lapse for a while, many different things can happen. But while I'm holding as my intention to engage in life to the best of my ability, coordinating myself so as to ensure that this life goes as smoothly as possible, there are many things that may not go in my favor. But what this in turn can cause a rise, an energetic release within the body, which we can call an emotional response. And this emotional response can become very dominant, and it can start to infiltrate my thinking processes and start causing a pouring out of thoughts which prevent me from actually staying focused on this. So now we start to see how everything that we've talked about, where we direct our attention, our framework of preference, how we want things to be and how we don't want things to be, and then the idea of being overwhelmed with different emotions, which we can call stress, how all of these together can kind of create this reality where we are bound to experience a kind of a dislike for the idea of perfection. Although we want things to go the way as best as they can go, we also, by having that as our want, can, as a consequence, experience the overwhelm of it not going the way we want. So just in our striving for perfection, how it can stress us out, our striving for perfection can get us so focused on things going the way we imagine them to go, the kind of fantasy of it all being ideal. And this ideal can become so gripping, we can become so identified with it, that it prevents us from being able to accept the moment-to-moment fluctuations and changes that occur as the whole thing unfolds. Because what is perfection? It's some end result that in the after fact we can say, oh, that went perfectly. That was a perfect life. That whole thing went exactly the way I wanted. It was perfect. But that's afterwards. But the whole process in the interim, that is a moment-to-moment experience. So the idea of striving for perfection is striving to have a result which is further down the line. But it's the moment-to-moment engagement with the process that's going to allow that perfection to come about or not. And that moment-to-moment process, that requires our being attentive and noticing when things go the way we want or don't go the way we want, or noticing how we can start to get entangled with thoughts that say, oh, this is no good, oh, it should be like that, it should be like this. When we start to get better at noticing these type of thoughts, then we start to free ourselves, or at least allow ourselves to become free of getting so entangled with them. So it's not a case that all the thoughts are just going to stop. It's not a case that I'm not going to want things to be a certain way. That's not the case. It's just that it's not becoming so preoccupied with it being perfect, the result being perfect, that it prevents us from being in the experience. So we have, there was another question that was asked, how can I accept imperfection? How can I accept imperfection when society insists on telling me that I have to be perfect? Now this is a challenging one. When we think of society and the demand of society for us to be perfect. Well, I suppose we can ask ourselves the question, first of all, is that actually true? Does society want us to be perfect? I know marketing campaigns can pitch the idea that we're going to be some ideal version of ourselves by buying a certain product or engaging in a certain service. And we can also look at the education system and the idea of having to do very well in exams and get certain results so as to move on. The society has different frameworks which kind of measures us on our capacity in regards one to another. And we are endeavoring to function within society in accordance with the different structures that are in place. Society in itself is aiming to create cohesion and harmony. By having these constructs and these structures, it's doing its best. And we, as members of society, are endeavoring to play in accord with these rules, these constructs, so that we can navigate what it means to be a social being to the best of our ability. But we also have choice. We have choice to get caught up in things in certain ways and not get caught up in things. Not everybody is participating in life in the same way. And there's some people who do live a life which is very competitive in many different disciplines, in many different guises, and they can really burn themselves out. But we have that choice. And when we talk about society is demanding us to be perfect, society is driving for the idea that everything will be harmonious and that we'll all be able to live together harmoniously and cohesively in a manner which is going to be for the betterment of society. But we know through our conversation that perfection and an ideal society, that is not something which is going to exist when we are identifying with the human form, the manifested form, the form which is based on polarity and duality. So as members of society, we can understand that there will always be things which we can critique, that we can criticize, that we can point out as being something that can be bettered, something which can be improved upon. And this allows for our development, our evolution. As members of society, we are taking a responsibility to engage in society to the best of our effort, to the best of our ability. But is it of any benefit to society if we become so overwhelmed that we're no longer in a position to actually offer our best? So we can have the illusion that our best is that, we do this perfectly and we do that perfectly and we have these 10 new skills by the end of the year and that we read so many books and we do all these different things. We can set up these markers. But society would benefit a lot if we were able to just step out our door as we enter into the world and actually pay attention to what's going on around us and live in a way where our response to the things that are going on around us are appropriate and are actually being carried out as a response as opposed to a reaction based on our preferences. And society would benefit from this. If we have in our head that we want to get really good at time management, and then we're sitting into our cars and we're trying to get to our next meeting, and we realize that the time that we have isn't enough time to get there on time and get parking and attend the meeting on time, then our whole objective to be effective in our time management, that's gone out the window. But who suffers in that moment? Well, I can even speak from my own personal experience that sometimes, because of your preference to adhere to your objective to be good at time management, that those around you, those who are queuing up for the bus, or those who are waiting in traffic, or those who are crossing the road, They suffer because you want to get your appointment on time. And so you're engaging in society in a manner which is for your own preference of you being a good timekeeper, whereas all these other people have to suffer as a consequence of that. So that's just one example, but I'm sure you can relate it back to your own personal experience, that sometimes we can hold something as a standard that we want for ourselves. And in our endeavors to hold that standard for ourselves, we can cause a lot of other people to suffer, which kind of leads the whole practice and pursuit to be counter-effective. So this is something which, again, we can relate back to our preferences. We can have markers of things that we want to move towards in terms of our experience. But when we talk about perfection as being the end result, when's the end result going to be? On the day of our death? When do we find out whether we have been perfect in that task or skill or activity? It's going to fluctuate. There's going to be good days, and there's going to be days which we can say are not so good. There's going to be moments when we're more skilled or effective in doing things, and moments when we're not. And this will depend on a multitude of different factors. And all of these factors are all coming together. So it's impossible for us to say, well, this caused this to happen, and it was because of this that I couldn't do that. But what we need to get good at is to be able to accept all of these factors, all of these variables, accept them as the reality that's taking place, and then recognize that the perfect version of us is going to be as an individual who's able to respond with the utmost of effort to respond effectively. So we are going to be closer to expressing perfection when we are extremely intent on being perfect in the moments that are occurring, not in the fantasy of who we're going to be when we tick that box of having achieved a certain skill. So it's the moment-to-moment experience which matters to us. So with this, you will get an air, or you'll get the idea that perfection is based on our capacity to be able to just live reality, to accept reality, to engage with our lived experience, recognizing that we have certain preferences, maybe that, we want our food to be hotter. We don't want it so cold, we'd like it to be hotter, or that we want to get there 10 minutes earlier, or that, different things that we want to happen, but also accepting that this won't always work out, and being able to just let go of these things. So being content, letting go, accepting reality as it comes to us. And in a moment, I'd like to read a little excerpt in relation to that. But just before I do, if there's any comments that you have or anything that you'd like to say in relation to what I've just said, please share, and I'll see if I can respond in any way that might be meaningful. And while we're waiting for some comments, I just use this opportunity to say that the idea of letting go is a hard one to embark upon, and we can be helped out with this when we take breaks from the goings-on of our life. So in August, myself and Ryan Kirksack, a fellow Kriya Yoga teacher, are going to be hosting a Kriya Yoga meditation retreat on the 13th of August to the 18th of August, and this will be in Ireland, in Tullow, in County Carlow in Ireland. So it's a week-long retreat, and it's an opportunity for people to just disconnect from what's going on around them, to practice the art of letting go, and practice the art of acceptance, and to learn techniques, meditation techniques, and other techniques which are going to support in your own ability to become better at paying attention to where you want to direct your attention, and being able to do so even when your preferences are pulling you one way or another. So if you'd like to find out more about the retreat, you can follow the link in the bio, and you'll also find it on www.theyogisway.com. www.davidmcgrath.ie. So I have some comments here. Samantha just asked, I was wondering, have humans always had such a potent drive for perfection, or has the impulse increased over time? I don't know the answer to this. A potent drive for perfection. It seems like that life, whether humans, if we want to just limit it to humans, but life seems to have an attractive force, something which is trying to bring things to a higher stage of expression. I suppose this is what nature refers to as evolution. And so in some ways, evolution could be seen as a force for perfecting, as Darwin said, the survival of the fittest. And so there's always this moving with the best, let's say, you've got the best genetic makeup or the best characteristics to ensure your survival, and you're moving on. So it seems that life has this built into it. And then us, human beings, as expressions of life, we're not immune to it. So it's within us. The difference is that we're able to reflect on it. We're able to think about it. We're able to have this relationship to it where we can observe it. And other animal forms can't do this. And yeah, all right, so I'm going to finish here with a little reading from the book The Yogi's Way. So this is from one of the niyamas, santosha, which means acceptance or contentment. So it's just a reading, and then after that we'll finish the live. So before I start reading, I'd just like to say thank you. I'm not sure if it's been a perfect live, but I've enjoyed being able to be here and to be welcomed by you guys and to have your support. If you have any questions that may come to you in the coming days in relation to this, email or send them on, and I'll do my best to answer them if I can. So here's the reading. Living with contentment means allowing life to do its thing, without expecting it to always suit us. The very nature of life is balance and unity. Our participation in life, through our individual expression, impacts on this state of integrated equilibrium. Through the things we think, say, and do, we create a ripple effect which can contribute either positively or negatively toward the harmonious flow of life. Living with contentment means acknowledging that we are supported by life, and that by being one with life we must support it too. This may result in our having to sacrifice our comfort and pleasures from time to time, to a greater or lesser degree. Ultimately, however, it falls on us to allow life to express with balance for the good of all. Living from this understanding, we can remain grounded in certainty, even amidst a great deal of uncertainty. As we apply ourselves to life, endeavoring to learn and grow, building relationships, providing ourselves and those dear to us with material comforts, offering meaningful service, and evolving in our understanding, we do so without expectation. We do so out of the sheer joy of living. We live our lives not to fulfill any sense of lack, but rather to serve life itself. If we live with the expectation that life will reward us, or that we are deserving of being in life's favor, we're missing the point. While wholesome actions can bring wholesome results, it's the very act of participating in life to the best of our ability that brings the greatest reward. Living with contentment means being alive with life in every moment, regardless of the circumstances. Thank you all again. Take care.